Peace be upon you. I posted an episode in response to Al-Daheeh's What a Coincidence episode. I noticed that many of his followers defended him in the comments, saying, "No, don't be unjust to Al-Daheeh. He's simply presenting science and theories. He could be right or wrong, but his intention is not to spread atheism, and it's not fair to judge him based on one episode." Although Al-Daheeh's overall approach was crystal clear in that episode, I went back and reviewed many of his other episodes, only to find that most of them promote atheism, masquerading as science and materialism. In this episode, I will present more examples from Al-Daheeh's episodes. By the way, I am not Egyptian, but I'm keen on simplifying my language to eliminate any accent barriers. I love and cherish my friends from Egypt and elsewhere, with whom I share a bond of faith. Dear viewers, in order to envision the trajectory of Al-Daheeh and his like and understand the full picture, we will start with a very important introduction, which won't take long. In the Journey of Certainty, we clarified that our belief in Allah was established through mind, innate nature, and experimental science. Atheism starts with its insistence on a predetermined result. Denying the existence of Allah, as we showed in the episode, has materialism hijacked science. Atheism does not acknowledge this. It doesn't want to come across as biased or unscientific with its insistence on a predetermined conclusion. So, atheism comes disguised as the pure materialistic explanation for existence, i.e., it claims that it does not acknowledge the unseen and only acknowledges materialistic things. But when atheism insisted on contradicting the evidence of mind, innate nature, and true experimental science, and excluded the existence of the Creator, it was left with no explanation for the universe and life. There were gaps everywhere. Atheism tried to fill these gaps. How? By using explanations that rely on the unseen. Absurd explanations, as we showed last episode. Well, since you were eventually compelled to rely on the unseen, why not admit the existence of a creator, the true unseen, whose existence is supported by all the evidence instead of your absurd unseens? No, anything but the creator. To avoid appearing rigid, atheism hides behind experimental science, which in reality is pseudoscience when you examine the evidence, or real science that points to the existence of Allah. But atheism distorts its conclusions and presents it as evidence for denying the existence of Allah. The Al-Daheeh episodes that I watched all revolve around this theme. For those who follow the Journey of Certainty, this episode will be a case study to study Al-Daheeh's style, just like we previously studied Adnan Ibrahim's style, so that you can develop critical listening skills. In his episode, What a Coincidence, Al-Daheeh denied the intentional fine-tuning of the universe and offered, in its place, the coincidental multiverse theory, which is an absurd hypothesis involving the unseen, as we showed in our previous episode. Al-Daheeh then claimed that the creation of mankind was an outcome of random evolution, and he denied the intricate design in the human body, using false evidence throughout, as we'll demonstrate. He went on to deny innate human nature by questioning the existence of a sense of purpose for life, religiosity, basic axioms, moral tendency, and free will. He gave materialistic explanations for life and death and claimed that humans are capable of resurrecting the dead. He hinted that Allah doesn't have a real existence but is a meaning invented by humans. Those who are surprised by our claim that Al-Daheeh promotes atheism should be aware that Al-Daheeh's approach is different from others like Sharif Jabir, who directly tells you, "I want you to deny Allah's existence." No, Al-Daheeh does not speak directly about Islam, but he demolishes the foundations upon which Islam is built, such as innate nature, faith in the concept of creation and the soul, while pretending that he is only talking about science. So you don't sense that he is attacking your religion, but you gradually start to develop doubts. Moreover, all his sources that he brags about are books written by atheists. As for those who say Al-Daheeh is only relaying science and theories and referring to the sources, we ask them, why does he, on these topics, refer only to atheists' books which are full of pseudoscience and absurd unseens, as we will see? Why doesn't he reference the reputable research that proves that these theories are nonsense? Even when Al-Daheeh presents real research, why does he draw false conclusions to support atheistic theories? Let's analyze these points one by one, dear viewers. We talked about the fine-tuning of the universe and how Al-Daheeh raised doubts about it in his What a Coincidence episode. Let's take a look at living organisms. If these beings were not created by a creator with intention, knowledge, and wisdom, how did these live organisms come to be? Al-Daheeh, in his episode, Dinosaur Shawarma, claims it was evolution. It's strange how Al-Daheeh completely avoided mentioning Darwin's name, his book, or the theory of evolution throughout the episode. He does refer to an 1859 book, though.
In 1859, a scientist, we don't know his name, published a book, we don't know its title either, which discussed the origin of species. We are confronted with this powerful fossil evidence, which includes the huge mix predicted in the 1859 book.
Daheeh, are you ashamed to present these names to your audience? Or what, anyway? Do you have evidence that your claims about the evolution of organisms are true? Al-Daheeh says, sure. The Archaeopteryx fossil represents a transitional link between reptiles and birds, so it can be considered as the first bird. Al-Daheeh also says about dinosaurs.
The scientific community agrees that these are the ancestors of the 10,000 bird species that exist today.
I have previously demonstrated in the Tarzan episode, based on papers from renowned journals such as Science and Nature, that there is no agreement in the scientific community whatsoever, and I discussed the research which denies that the Archaeopteryx is a link to birds. But Al-Daheeh cherry-picks whatever suits him and claims that there is consensus on his choices. I also explained in the episode, Who Stole the Million? Why the idea of transitional fossils is an utterly comical and deceitful idea. In the same episode, Dinosaur Shawarma, Al-Daheeh presents more evidence for evolution, specifically human evolution.
When he started to look for something called atavism, which is hidden traces of our ancestors in our DNA. For example, you sometimes find babies born with a tail.
So our ancestors are animals with tails, and babies with tails are the evidence. I demonstrated in the episode, Your Tale That You Know Little About, how this claim, originating from Darwin's book, The Descent of Man, and based on external similarities, is an ancient falsehood, and that there are several scientific papers in Nature and other journals by reputable researchers, some of whom are disciples of the theory, which show that the so-called human tail is actually a protrusion and appendage of fatty tissue and fiber without any bones or cartilage, so it has nothing to do with an animal's tail. These appendages can appear in many places, for example on the neck, as in this paper in Nature. Therefore, what Al-Daheeh and his like call a tail is actually a medical condition known scientifically as spinal dysraphism, spina bifida, or lipoma, not a tail indicating animal origins. However, Al-Daheeh uses any old myth, pseudoscience, and pretends to convey unbiased, reference-based science. Well, Al-Daheeh, if mankind came to be through evolution and coincidence, how do you explain the intricate design and perfection in the human body? Al-Daheeh answers in the episode, Colors of the Past. He claims that the human body isn't perfect but has flaws. Let's see.
Under the cornea is a lens that focuses light, so your eyes have greatly evolved over time, meaning a lot of effort went into forming your eyes. I hear someone saying, wow, this is the height of scientific miracles in humans. The human eye became as perfect as it can be. I don't want to shock you by saying this, but your eyes actually have flaws. What? How can this be?
Of course, the idea that the human eye is defective was promoted by the atheist writer referred to by Al-Daheeh in his episodes, Richard Dawkins. We've already debunked this in the episode Caught You, where we explained in detail, based on scientific research, how the eye structure, which the claim to be defective, is a necessity and a superior solution to optimize the use of the space of the eye, per the journal Vision Research. This structure exposes dozens of different cell types to light before it reaches the retinal cells, which increases the power and clarity of vision, as published in the most famous journals like PNAS, Nature, and others. Even the evolutionary website phys.org states, having the photoreceptors, light-sensitive cells at the back of the retina is a design feature, and that the idea that the eye would be better if the cells were in front of the retina is folly. Al-Daheeh ignores all scientific research and cites the folly of Richard Dawkins. We show detailed examples of the lies and falsifications of science that Dawkins uses to convince people that God is a delusion. Okay, Al-Daheeh, let's move past the human body. How do you explain the existence of innate nature? What do you mean by innate nature? It means that people are born with roots for religiosity, an inclination to seek a higher power, and basic axioms such as causality that whatever begins to exist has a cause, moral tendencies such as loving good and hating evil, the feeling that our life must have a purpose, teleology, and free will to do something or not, and feel responsible for our choices. All this is part of innate nature. Innate nature is a great dilemma for atheists because its existence requires the interference of an outside power that has intent and knowledge. It can't be explained by mere random biochemical reactions. Imagine, for example, if someone says, "This computer was assembled by chance," its parts joined together in a structure without a manufacturer. It is simply the result of strong winds which put it together as you see it. We switch on the computer, only to find a complete integrated operating system and programs, each with a purpose. How do you, atheist, explain the existence of these programs? If we get past your comical lie about the hardware, how do you explain the existence of the software? Mere biochemical reactions, random mutations, and natural selection per the theory of evolution. If we concede and assume that these things really can create a human being and bring him to life, how would these blind concepts install the harmonious, directed components of innate nature in humans and reproduce it in every newborn? Here, atheism starts thrashing about frantically. Some atheists look for materialist explanations for these innate components. To them, we say, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you found genes for religiosity, others for rational necessities, a third group for morals, and a fourth set of genes for the sense of purpose. What is this harmonious, directed bundle which drives people to believe in a creator's existence, to love worshiping him, and find refuge in him, with mental necessities like causality, that indicates his existence, moral tendencies attuned with his orders, and a sense of teleology that pushes them to seek his guidance and follow it? If you truly find materialist reasons for innate components, it would only be more proof of the might of the Creator, who created it in humans and made it integrated and compatible with his guidance. Furthermore, if it was all just a matter genes and biochemical reactions, how do you explain free will, which is also a part of innate nature? If everything is just matter, humans would simply be puppets of their genes that move them in a predetermined direction, without any choice. Or are you saying that there are genes that force you to have free will? Here, atheism reaches a dead end and is forced to deny innate nature. It feels compelled to deny things that people inherently recognize in themselves. By the way, I talked in detail about atheism's dilemma with innate nature in episodes 3 to 12 of The Journey of Certainty. If you watch them, you will hear the scientific discussion on this issue and fully understand where Al-Daheeh and his like are taking us. You will see how, in his episodes, Al-Daheeh presents the atheistic viewpoint on each of the components of innate nature that we mentioned. Sense of purpose, the feeling that there is a purpose to life. Religiosity, basic axioms, moral tendency, and free will. As for the purpose of life, a clip of someone asking Al-Daheeh about the purpose of life and requesting advice for the youth went viral. Al-Daheeh's response was so shocking that those fooled by him were forced to say that he was just joking. However, when you see that he refers to specific writers to support his response, doesn't change his response afterward, and provides replies that align with his materialistic views and atheistic approach, you know that he wasn't joking. The question was,
what's your message for the youth who have no purpose in life?
Well, what's wrong with that? Life is purposeless. Didn't you read?
But you have many goals.
Albert Camus and Sartre, in their existentialism books, assume that there is no meaning to life.
No, there must be a meaning to life. Mankind is here on Earth with needs and specific goals.
Sure, there are many goals. We want to eat, drink, and reproduce.
we want to eat, drink, and reproduce. They said, there is only our life in this world. We die, we live, nothing but time destroys us. He says that life is without a purpose, so there is no place for Allah's words. I have not created mankind and jinn except to worship me, or the texts on developing the earth in a way that pleases Allah, or those on the attainment of heaven and salvation from hell. Yet some people still doubt that Al-Daheeh promotes atheism and nihilism. As for religiosity, his episode, The Lord of Mars, is sufficient proof of his disregard for religion and religiosity. Al-Daheeh doesn't talk much about religiosity. Rather, he talks about things that Allah has made crystal clear, and presents statements that clash with them as science, as if divine revelation has no value. Unfortunately, some people will say, why do you shove religion into everything? Those people don't understand the relationship between the sources of knowledge, the mind, innate nature, authentic testimony such as revelation, and experimental science. Revelation is knowledge. ayahs, and authentic hadith is knowledge, and they can never contradict true science. Some revelation is conclusive, with a clear explanation, so if it contradicts experimental science, this science must be pseudoscience, as we frequently demonstrated in The Journey of Certainty. If we believe that there is a contradiction between true experimental science and revelation, the problem might be in our interpretation of revelation. This harmony between revelation and science has rules and regulations. But to say, don't mix knowledge and religion, is utter ignorance. Those who say so need to watch the episode Has Materialism Hijacked Science? Basic axioms are the foundation for worldly and religious knowledge. For example, causality. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Therefore, there must be a cause for the existence of the universe and man, and sciences are based upon observing causal relationships. In his episode, The Cause, Al-Daheeh questions the basics of causality, citing David Hume's views, which question the existence of causal relationships. Some might say, he's just presenting David Hume's views, not saying he agrees with them. Again, why does he specifically present opinions that lead to atheism, and what's the point of presenting them without presenting a response? As for the moral tendency, in his episode, Children's Morals, Al-Daheeh acknowledges that we have a moral tendency, as we like justice and dislike injustice. But he questions its validity and fairness because he claims, according to alleged research, that this moral tendency is directed only at those who are like us, meaning that it is biased. Al-Daheeh says,
To sum up, what I understand from these studies is that they indicate that we are somehow born with inherent morals. We come to this universe with specific morals, some of which are very good and very noble. But these good, noble morals are mostly directed at those who are similar to us. We like those who are similar to us, but we are ready to accept injustice and hardship for those who are different.
Notice that Al-Daheeh is not talking about feelings of familiarity towards those similar to us, or the corruption in the morals of some people as they get older, or the change in our moral standards that makes us accept injustice. No, he tries to convince you that moral standards are inherently defective and biased from childhood. What does that mean? This claim has two serious consequences. First, that the existence of these morals doesn't indicate a creator. I have previously explained how the existence of morals in our innate nature is evidence for the existence of a creator who makes people love goodness and justice and hate evil and injustice. However, according to Al-Daheeh, these morals are biased, such that we accept injustice and hardship for others, simply because they are different from us. Thus, this moral tendency is neither fair nor wise. It is not evidence of a wise creator, as it is relative and biased. The second dangerous consequence is that these morals are unreliable since they're not absolute truths, but are relative and biased. Note that Al-Daheeh says this at the end of an episode, which starts as follows.
If we left a child on an island, what would he tell us when he grows up and comes back? What would annoy him? Would he accept injustice? Would he accept abuse? Would he betray? Would he respect his parents? Would he like homosexuals? These are all very important questions.
Would he like homosexuals? Then, Al-Daheeh, you are suggesting that if we don't like homosexuals, it is simply because they are different from us, and not because homosexuality is vile or anything like that. And we would accept injustice and hardship for them, and ban them from practicing their homosexuality. This is even clearer when we see how Al-Daheeh denies free will. Thus, according to Al-Daheeh, homosexuals have no choice but to act out their homosexuality. Morals for Al-Daheeh are not absolute values. There is no right and wrong. Rather, Al-Daheeh defines evil as follows.
Someday we may be able to cure evil. We may be able to cure any trait disdained by society.
Of course, this definition is subject to change, and there are many societies that don't disdain homosexuality, so it isn't necessarily an evil, according to Al-Daheeh. Al-Daheeh also talks in the episode Documentary about the benefits of pornography and how it connected the world together. He talks about porn, indecent images.
Dear viewer, porn was the driver for the cables and the infrastructure that built the internet. At the very least, the internet deserves credit for supporting many households.
Al-Daheeh even credits porn for the spread of printing, microfilm, etc. It wouldn't surprise me if Al-Daheeh starts to openly promote homosexuality after setting the stage in his episode, He, She, and the Circles of Identity. So, your rejection of homosexuality is an injustice to homosexuals. It's just because they are different from you, not because homosexuality itself is vile. Well, on what grounds did Al-Daheeh build his claims? On Paul Bloom's experiments. Who is Paul Bloom?
Here comes the role of the famous psychologist Paul Bloom, whom I've mentioned, ad nauseum, in the past 500 episodes, because I simply like this guy. His lectures are excellent to say the least, and they are available online for free.
Paul Bloom is an atheist who wrote the article, Is God an Accident?, where he states that the universal themes of religion emerge by accident as byproducts of our mental systems. He also represents atheists in debates. This is Paul Bloom, whom Al-Daheeh likes and advises you to follow on the internet. Thus, Paul Bloom is not a child, nor is he on an island. He is an atheist trying to find an atheistic explanation for morals. Well, what's wrong with that? Even if he is an atheist, it doesn't affect the credibility and integrity of his research. If you truly believe that, you really need to watch the episode, Science and Homosexuality, to learn how research neutrality, which is presented as a doctrine, is a laughable myth. Add to that his failure in drawing conclusions from Bloom's experiment.
The surprise was that these beautiful, innocent children, whom we saw before, who liked those who help because they can differentiate between justice and injustice, chose and liked the robots, which obstructed other robots who chose a different kind of chocolate.
Children chose the robot which obstructed the unwrapping of the chocolate that was different from the one they like. So, Al-Daheeh uses this experiment, only Allah knows its credibility, conducted by an atheist Bloom, to extrapolate serious conclusions like the ones we heard, all the while pretending to be a promoter of science. So Al-Daheeh dealt with the 4 components of innate nature using the different approaches we mentioned that are commonly used in atheists' arguments. We're left with the 5th component, free will, which Al-Daheeh focused on the most, as it annoys atheists the most and reveals the absurdity of their arguments. If the human being is pure matter, controlled by biochemical laws and electricity and neurons, then we are nothing more than helpless robots directed to do specific jobs without any choice. So how does atheism explain free will? It is an undeniable fact that human beings make choices about their actions, to buy or not, to speak or not, to write or not. The priest of atheism, Richard Dawkins, when asked if there was any material, evolutionary explanation for free will, said,
It's a question that I dread, actually, because I don't have a very well thought out view about it. I think that, I have a materialist view of the world. I think that, that things are determined in a rational way by antecedent events. And so that commits me to the view that when I think I have free will, when I think that I'm exercising free choice, I'm deluding myself, that my brain states are determined by physical events, and yet that seems to contradict, to go against the very powerful subjective impression that we all have, that we do have free will.
Despite that, atheists chose to delude themselves and tried to convince people with the opposite of what they know to be the truth about free will. Towards that end, they forged studies and falsified their conclusions. Al-Daheeh's job is just to echo their ideas, but in Arabic.
The big question is that really what genes want? Someone might ask, what do genes have to do with this? When this my choice? In his book, The Selfish Gene, the famous biologist Richard Dawkins.
So, it is funny to think that you have free will, and Al-Daheeh tries to persuade you of this, using the priest of theism's book, The Selfish Gene, who himself confessed that free will is a dilemma. Brother Rita Zidan published a book in which he scientifically critiqued the myth of the selfish gene and demonstrated its filthy moral outcomes. The biology sciences community ridicules the idea of the selfish gene, as in this interview with Professor Edward Wilson.
And just to be beyond any shadow of doubt, that whole notion of the selfish gene,
yes,
you think that is now a rather antiquated vision of or version of natural selection?
I've abandoned it, and I think most serious scientists working on it have abandoned it. Some defenders may be out there, but they've been relatively, almost totally silent since our major papers come out.
Wilson refers to his paper published in Nature. Yet Al-Daheeh still cites the selfish gene. Al-Daheeh imitates atheists even in the images they use. When the atheist Sam Harris wrote the book Free Will, where he states in the introduction, "Free will is an illusion," and describes the human being as a biochemical puppet, Al-Daheeh repeats the same statement in his episode, Controlling the Brain, and even uses a similar image to that on the cover of Sam Harris's book. In that episode, he says,
Ultimately, the scientist's current impression is that your movements, memories, feelings, emotions, and imagination are merely a combination of electricity, chemicals, and neurons. Why can't we control our minds? Why can't we control our addictions? Why can't we control our emotions? And as I'm saying all this, couldn't it be the mind that is controlling us?
So we don't control our addictions, and our mind is controlling us. In the episode Your Atheist Half, Al-Daheeh says,
These questions take us back to one of the most controversial intellectual issues in history. Are humans controlled or free? In this case, it is possible that they are controlled, but their left brain constructs a great story to convince them that the decision they took was their choice.
So, your right brain may force you to do something, then your left brain makes up a story to convince you that you have free will, when you really don't. Of course, dear viewers, atheists focus on denying free will, not only to overcome the dilemma of innate nature, but also to justify all vice, such as homosexuality. This argument can even justify crime. In the episode, The Serial Killer, Al-Daheeh says,
The biological side is very important in creating a serial killer. Genes, hormones, changes in the brain.
And in the same episode,
This collection of discoveries, though horrifying, makes us view the human as a biological being with genes that interact with nature. He has a limited choice over both.
So you don't control your genes, and you don't control the environment, nature, and these two control you. Therefore, you don't have free will. And in the episode, Controlling the Brain, he says,
By changing the specific electricity in the brain, we were able to make some people accept injustice.
In the episode, Free Will or Free Will, Al-Daheeh attributes the sexual harassment of children to a brain infection. He says,
Such a story, if you think about it, is terrifying. It shows that simple changes in the brain may alter our desires, inclinations, actions, and may affect our ability to control these things.
Of course, Al-Daheeh will present this in the context of trying to understand this group of people in order to help them instead of punishing them. Is this the message that the youth receive? Or is it the normalization of vice by claiming the lack of free will? And for whose benefit? Who would benefit from promoting, in Muslim communities, the idea that humans have no choice when it comes to vice and crimes? The youth who are convinced by Al-Daheeh's claims will certainly develop doubts in their faith and think, why would our Lord hold us accountable for our actions if we don't have a choice? Now that we've discussed Al-Daheeh's atheistic approach to innate nature, let's discuss divine actions, such as resurrection. Ibrahim says, My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death. Al-Daheeh says, no, we also give life and cause death. In the episode, Resurrection of the Dead, Al-Daheeh claims that science is close to resurrecting the dead.
I want you to dream bigger. Consider this. Why not resurrect the dead?
How, Al-Daheeh? He says,
Your DNA has all your data. All your traits are there in your DNA.
Note how he said all data and all traits. He adds that if we take the DNA in the frozen cells of dead people, inject them into stem cells, and put these cells in a woman's womb, we'll have an identical cloned baby. It's possible then to create an identical clone of Einstein, for example. Although this is total nonsense, even if it can be done, because it wouldn't be resurrection. Al-Daheeh presents the same absurd argument used by the king who argued with Ibrahim, peace be upon him. My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death. He said, I give life and cause death. Ibrahim said, Indeed, Allah brings up the sun from the east, so bring it up from the west. And the disbeliever was confounded, and Allah does not guide the unjust. Despite all this, Al-Daheeh's starting point is a lie, that your DNA has all your data and all your traits, including moral, psychological, personal traits, and your intelligence. From basic observations, it's well known that Siamese twins have the exact same DNA, and many of them grow up in the same environment, yet they tend to have very different personalities. As for the scientific explanation, epigenetics helps us understand that the same DNA strand can be read in different ways, resulting in different outcomes. More importantly, modern genetics denies the existence of a specific gene for a specific behavioral trait, as in this study published in Nature in 2008. which shows that decoding the human genome revealed that even simple physical traits could not be limited to a specific gene, or even a specific group of genes. So how about behavioral traits, which are much more complicated than physical ones? Your behavioral traits are affected by your DNA, epigenetics, and the environment. And all of this is only the body, and you aren't just a body. You have a soul, you have an essence, and that is what atheism and materialism try to deny. In the episode, Why Do We Die?, Al-Daheeh mocks the concept of an angel of death under the guise of mocking death, and bases the whole episode on the myth of Dawkins's selfish gene. Without you realizing, he canceled the concept of a soul and replaced the true unseen, the soul, with the myth of the selfish gene. I will wrap up with a final example of Al-Daheeh's promotion of atheism. In the episode, Trade of Ideas, Al-Daheeh says,
This is what makes humanity special, that it can come up with abstract ideas. With no physical presence that we can play with and with time, it can develop these ideas and make them more complicated. Important ideas which facilitate cooperation among us. Ideas such as money, state, law, and patriotism. Although, their value comes from us, yet they affect us.
So, ideas that don't really exist and ideas gain their value from us. Could you, Al-Daheeh, tell me what to read if I want to know more about these ideas? He answers,
In his book, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, the author Yuval Noah Harari uses these experiments and stories to ask one question. What's the difference between us humans and other animals?
Al-Daheeh presents Harari's response to the question,
Why is it that only humans can cooperate with each other thus, and not other animals? I'll tell you, because man is the only organism who is capable of inventing ideas.
Right. Well, let's listen to Al-Daheeh's Harari. What do you mean, Harari, by ideas invented by humans? Let's listen to Harari, the Israeli atheist writer.
Humans, in contrast, use their language not merely to describe reality, but also to create new realities, fictional realities. A human can say, look, there is a God above the clouds, and if you don't do what I tell you to do, after you die, God will punish you and send you to hell. And if you all believe these stories that I've invented, then you will follow the same norms and laws and values, and you can cooperate. Humans cooperate by believing in the same fictions. Millions of people come together to build a cathedral or a mosque or fight on a crusade or in a jihad because they all believe in the same stories about God and heaven and hell.
In his episode, Al-Daheeh repeated everything that Harari said except for the part about God and heaven and hell. Al-Daheeh talked about the concept of humans inventing ideas that do not exist and referred you to a book and a writer who considers Allah and heaven and hell an example of these ideas. These are the scientists whom Al-Daheeh refers to. Harari, who predicts the possibility that, in the future, wealthy people would become gods and poor people would turn into worthless people, and Dawkins, whose atheistic nonsense we exposed previously, and Sartre and Camus, who both claim that life has no meaning, and Paul Bloom, who represents atheists in debates and whom Al-Daheeh likes.
I honestly like this man.
These are Al-Daheeh's loved ones. Remember that Al-Daheeh claims that our noble feelings are directed to those similar to us. Isn't it possible, then, that you, Daheeh, like these people because they're similar to you and you are similar to them? This is what I saw in the Al-Daheeh episodes that I watched. Each one has a problem, without exception. And most of them plant atheistic concepts, disguised as materialism. Only Allah knows what else is there in the episodes that I didn't watch. I asked the young people who objected to my previous episode and said, no, Al-Daheeh doesn't promote atheism. Frankly, if you watched some or all the mentioned episodes of Al-Daheeh and didn't detect his promotion of atheism, then our presentation today should urge you to reconsider. Do you truly understand your religion? Do you have enough intellectual immunity? Is there any episode of Al-Daheeh's that exposes the lies of atheists and builds faith on a scientific foundation? Didn't you notice that whenever Al-Daheeh discusses religion, he does so in a mocking manner as in the episode The Lord of Mars?
Tell him, we would like a representative for Mecca's Grand Mosque on Mars. What's the problem? Franchise. We won't be against progress. And if you don't go to Hajj, get a franchise on Arafah and Muzdalifah, a profit that will never perish.
Indeed, those who recite the Book of Allah and establish prayer and spend out of what we have provided them, secretly and publicly, can expect a profit that will never perish.
A profit that will never perish.
No, he didn't mean to mock the ayah. He didn't. Have you ever seen him in any of his episodes refer to or show respect for an ayah? I wonder if Al-Daheeh is deliberately promoting pseudoscience, or he just doesn't know any better. What exactly does he believe in? All of that is not our concern. What concerns us is to show that he is spreading myths and atheism. Lastly, Al-Daheeh's episodes and atheistic arguments air on AJ+, a channel that is part of the Al Jazeera group. This same group previously aired the documentary In 7 Years, which, as we discussed, attempted to normalize atheism. Other shows that mock Islamic rituals have also aired on AJ+, masquerading as comedy and a critique of current events. The same country launched the Al-Arabi Al-Jadid channel under Azmi Bishara's supervision. This channel started by attacking the rightly guided caliphs and casting doubt on all Islamic matters of consensus. Unfortunately, these channels are funded by Muslim money. Nations normally use their wealth to promote their principles, ideas, and religion, while the Muslim nation uses the resources of its wealthiest countries to destroy religion, promote atheism, and corrupt its youth, leaving them without a goal, purpose, or religion. These Muslim countries compete in this. Surely, there is no power and no strength except with Allah. We need practical steps. First, your friends and your kids who follow Al-Daheeh. Invite them to watch this episode and the previous one. Second, share this video on social media to help raise awareness. Third, I advise you to watch The Journey of Certainty, which aims to address the mind and the innate nature scientifically and build faith upon strong, stable foundations. And always remember, dear viewers, and Allah is predominant over His affair, but most people do not know.